I think everybody knew heading into the 2016 season that one of the best divisions in football was going to be the AFC West. And in particular, you were going to have three teams battling it out. You were going to have the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Broncos. Now, by default, a lot of people went with the Denver Broncos because you're talking about a team, the defending Super Bowl champions, their defense primarily intact, or at least enough intact with enough impact players to where their defense should be able to will them into the playoffs, if nothing else. Even though you were moving on from Peyton Manning, it's not like that was saying much in 2016 or 2015, excuse me. So, you looked at 2016, and it's funny because at first you go into that offseason, you assume, based off some of the glimpses you saw out of Osweiler, even though he wasn't great, that the Broncos were going to come to terms with him. They were going to give him a long-term deal, and he was going to be the guy given a chance to pick up the slack after Peyton Manning retired. But then ultimately that didn't happen. And the Broncos are probably pinching themselves for how fortunate they are that they ultimately didn't come to terms with Osweiler. Let Houston give him the $36 million guaranteed in the 4-year, $72 million contract. Because while you can sit there and say that the Denver Broncos quarterback play wasn't exactly stellar, which is true, at least they got it at a bargain basement price by comparison. But even looking at this team, while I thought in this season that the Broncos wouldn't necessarily get back to the same spot, early on in the year, this looked like a playoff team. This looked like a team that could still be scary come playoff time. You start off 4-2, and then you're 4-0, excuse me. Then you're 6-2, 7-3. 7-3 with 6 games to go. It's really, really hard to miss the playoffs once you get to that point in the season. 7-3, you basically feel like, for all intents and purposes, that if you win 3 of your last 6 games, you're probably in most years. Probably. Um, so it was a bit of a surprise to see the Denver Broncos ultimately peter out. Um, but it happened. And why did it happen? I think you look at the fact that this is a team that finished 2-4 in the AFC West, defending Super Bowl champions, didn't even finish with a 500 record in their own division. And again, you can come back to it time after time after time. More often than not, teams that make the playoffs handle their business in their division. The teams that don't, and it's just that simple. And for the Broncos, that sums up a lot of the problems. Just not enough success in their division. But then later on in the season, they had a 3-game stretch against quality opponents like Tennessee, New England, and Kansas City, and they lost all 3 of them. And in each of those 3 games, their offense scored 10 points or less. And I don't care how good your defense is. In today's NFL, there's too much of an emphasis on the passing game. There's too much big play potential that you could sit there and have a team move the ball down the field just because of pass interference penalties. You could have a 50-yard penalty and a 30-yard penalty, and they're in your red zone. But to sit there those 3 straight games in December, late in the year, Tennessee, New England, Kansas City, and you score 10 points or less, it ultimately shouldn't be a surprise that this team didn't make the playoffs. Now, why did it happen? Well, I think you look at them offensively, and Trevor Siemian was okay, but not great. Paxton Lynch got some action, and he most certainly needs a lot more work. While you had Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders both go over 1,000 yards, I thought this offense was missing something in the running game, whether it was C.J. Anderson, Devontae Booker. But a big part of the problem was the fact that they just couldn't protect and they couldn't block very well up front. I mean, they're really, really bad. You saw games in the 2016 season where it looked like the Broncos' offensive line couldn't block anybody. Outside, inside, didn't matter. It didn't even feel like teams would have to bring any more than 4 rushers, and they would be able to get to Siemian consistently. And at the end of the day, you look at their offense, it just wasn't good enough. 20th in passing yards, 28th in rushing yards per game. This is a team that's one way to stop a team's pass rushing, get them to hold up, is to be able to run the ball effectively. And the Broncos just didn't do that on a consistent basis. You could say, in theory, you have the defense in place that can win a championship. One way to supplement that is with a great running game. And the Denver Broncos just don't have it. But their defense wasn't quite the same as it had been in 2015 either. You're talking about a team that, while they finished first against the pass, and Von Miller had a Defensive Player of the Year type of season, This was a team that really struggled to stop the run. They were 29th in the league in rushing yards allowed per game. That was a thing that was a bit of a surprise for this defense, was how much of a sieve they were against the run. And at times they couldn't make the big stops because they couldn't stop teams in the running game. So, for the Broncos, you look at them and you say, this is a team that doesn't need a whole lot, and they could potentially get right back in the mix. But Gary Kubiak has retired. Wade Phillips was allowed to leave, and he's off in Los Angeles now. Now you bring in Vance Joseph, and we'll see what ultimately happens for the Broncos in 2017 and beyond. Heading into this offseason, this is a team that's lost quite a bit in terms of free agency the past couple of years. I don't expect them to lose a ton, but they have guys they need to make decisions on. Sylvester Williams is a free agent. I believe Brandon McManus is a free agent, but don't quote me on that. Bradley Roby, a former first-round pick. Now he's a few years into his career. You have to decide whether you're going to pick up a fifth-year option on him, whether you're going to want to re-sign him long-term. The Broncos are in kind of one of those holding patterns where they don't have a ton of money to go out and spend in a bunch of places, which wouldn't necessarily be the right way to go in anyways. And they don't have a ton of guys that they really have to worry about re-signing at this particular moment. So we'll see what they end up doing with their salary cap space. I don't expect them to be particularly active in free agency, but John Elway might get that bug in him and he might decide to go after it. Or he might decide to sit there and say, I didn't see enough out of Simeon. I don't know that I've seen enough out of Paxton Lynch to have confidence he can take over yet. They might be pursuers for Tony Romo. They may be in the marketplace for him. They may not be. We'll see what happens, and that'll be an interesting storyline that plays out this offseason. What happens with Tony Romo, and where does he ultimately go? And you would think that the Denver Broncos, with the situation they have, would at least be interested in potentially kicking the tires and seeing what this guy can do, but we'll see. But the Broncos need to do a good job in the draft. In particular, they need to beef up the offensive side of the football. They need help on the offensive line, both on the outside of the tackle position and in the interior at the guard position. Russell Wilson had a long-term contract, but he really didn't because it was basically a one-year deal and then it was an option. And the option's not getting picked up, so now Wilson is a free agent. You assume he's gone. So now, while they didn't get great play out of the left tackle position anyways, now it becomes an even bigger void, a bigger gaping issue, and it's going to have to be addressed. Unfortunately for the Broncos, it's not a great offensive line class. Fortunately for them, though, there are a couple of guys that can probably contribute at the left tackle position, and where the Broncos are going to be picking at pick 20 because of the depth and talent at some other positions in this draft, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. They could get a quality left tackle candidate to drop to them at number 20, and I think that's where most people right now are assuming they will go with this first-round pick at number 20, but any number of things could happen. Tackle, guard, they need help all over the place on the offensive line. I think they need to address the running back position too. I know they paid C.J. Anderson some money. I know there are plenty of people that are fans of Devontae Booker. I just didn't see enough from either one of these guys consistently to be confident that they could be the bell cow type of back that the Denver Broncos need. And in a really good running back class, I think it would behoove them to address that position again. And you look at the tight end position. You're going with guys like Virgil Green and A.J. Derby. No offense to them, but come on, seriously? That was part of the deal with Gary Kubiak, is he wasn't really huge on the tight end position in terms of them being pass catchers, but they need another option in the passing game. And this is a really good tight end class. I would expect them to address the tight end position at some point in time, and they should because they need to, because they have a lack of talent there. If they can improve this offensive side of the ball and work out some of the kinks in terms of their run defense, this is a Broncos team that in 2017, could be somebody to deal with, but we're ultimately going to have to see how the quarterback position battle plays out. Because if they don't bring in somebody like a Romo, you're still going to have a preseason battle between Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch. And is Lynch going to be ready to take over, or is Siemian going to hold him off? A lot of questions here that need answers with a new head coach, new defensive coordinator. Interesting time for the Denver Broncos. They could either go one or two directions. They can go right back into the championship contending mix, or they can start to slowly roll downhill and get themselves into a very bad place in the next couple of years.